Hello, good evening, and welcome to the Majority Show, Scotland's #1 anti-nationalist show, broadcast live every Wednesday at 7 p.m. Glad to have you with us. I'm your host, Mark Devlin. I'm here tonight with my co-hosts, Mary Devlin and David Griffiths. We're going to have a great show tonight. What we're going to be talking about?
Well, tonight I'm going to be looking at some of the urgent issues facing the Scottish Government.
And I'm going to be talking about the SNP's reliance on misinformation and lies in order to attract votes.
Okay, it seems I've lost my camera, so while the titles are running, I will get that fixed. All right, back in a second. Right, coming up, David's going to be talking about the transparent lies used by the SNP to mislead voters. Mary's going to be asking, what should the Scottish government actually be doing? And I will be talking about, after the Queen's funeral, is it time for a funeral for Sturgeon's Indy dream? We'll be back in just a second. Right, apologies for that. My battery on my camera ran out, which was not very good timing. Let's put it that way. But anyway, glad to be back. And we're going to do an update on our campaign to stop NewsQuest and its American owner, Gannett, to stop profiting from the national newspaper's anti-English hate and hypocrisy. This week we saw the editorial director of NewsQuest, a guy called Toby Granville, lied. He lied to his followers and to his employees that every one of NewsQuest's daily titles would publish a commemorative front and back cover for the Queen's funeral. It was basically a lie. In fact, the National, which is published by NewsQuest in Scotland, didn't do that at all. In fact, they had a whole week of anti-monarchy front pages. Now, whether you believe in the monarchy or not, many of these were in very poor taste. And they have a history of publishing titles that are covers that are in very poor taste, which we'll show you in a second. Anyway, due to our activism, we believe that they on the actual day after the Queen's funeral, they published this cover here, the last farewell, which they used was originally this photo, which of course they cropped out the flag there. But I'm sure there were some angry conversations going around NewsQuest to try and distance himself, I think, from the kind of very nasty and abhorrent front pages that they had been putting out.
Absolutely. And I don't know if you noticed also, many people tried to claim this was in fact a free speech issue, as if those same people would tolerate newspapers that promoted hate speech against any other groups like gays, Muslims, transgender people, the slightly more woke targets, if you like. So that was disingenuous in the extreme, all of that stuff, I thought.
Yeah, I mean, the point we say all the time is if anti-English bigots want to make their own newspaper, one that wants to relive Bannockburn every week and proclaim that there's going to be an Indy Ref, every year, almost every week they say a new Indy Ref is coming, and trying to divide Scots and publish anti-English articles, covers, and letters, then they're free to do so. But we do not think that a company of the stature of NewsQuest or Gannett, its US owners, should be doing that. And they shouldn't be enabling it, and they shouldn't be profiting from it. It's wrong. Now, it's not just us who say this. We have been running a petition for the past few months, and we now have over 6,000 followers, signatories to our petition. If you would like to sign it is at the top of our website. Here we have up the top here, NewsQuest petition. So next to donate shop, so all the good links are up there. But we think that this company trying to, in one hand, trying to say that they respect the Queen, and respect the UK, and then they have this type of cover here. This was for the Queen's Jubilee. Not acceptable hypocrisy. And if you can sign the petition, please do so. Hate is hate, and it has to stop. We will be talking more about their anti-English hate in future editions of the thing. Mary.
Yeah, we have a couple of comments coming in from Alan Jack, who says those two front pages were disgusting at times over the 2-week period.
Right.
And Linda Ross is saying it was the same last Saturday at Ibrox, Dundee United fans singing Lizzie's in a Box during the minute's silence.
Linda's absolutely right. I was at the game and it was disgusting. It really was. It was atrocious. How the police could stand there and not even look in the direction of these people committing what is very clearly a hate crime under the SNP's own definition was quite staggering. Awful.
Well, I mean, to some extent, I think people are. It's fair enough. I think for people to have an opinion. Of course, people have an opinion. We all have opinions. We have opinions. This is the thing. I just don't think, and over 6,000 signers also think the same thing, that NewsQuest should be funding it. That's the thing. And I don't think, and same thing perhaps with the Dundee United or Celtic or whatever it is now. We have nothing to do with football. We never mention it. But I mean, obviously, I think that many people across the UK look at that and go, "What are these? What is this club doing?" And their brand is just going down the toilet. And if you can only surmise that that's what the people who are running the business of these clubs and newspapers actually want. That seems to be the lesson in this. It's we're not, you can go out and stand in the street and say whatever, if the Queen, what have you. We may say, oh, that's terrible, right? But it's but I think, as you say, it's these companies that should really have more of a social responsibility to do that. Thank you very much there. Keep up the good work. We will try to do that. As I said, please sign the petition if you can. So many of you have done it already. Every little bit of pressure helps. We are targeting the staff there, and there's going to be much more to come as well. I don't mean staff, so not the staff. I mean the head management there at NewsQuest, and they deserve. I mean, they know. The thing, it's a bit of a strange thing. It's like, why are they publishing this? It's not obviously. It's either making money, in which case they shouldn't be making money from it, or it's not making money. So then, why are they doing it? Yeah. This is the question, and many questions need to be asked about this. And we hope that this will grow and grow until they do stop. And as we said, hate is hate, and it has to stop.
Yeah.
Coming up in a second, we'll be back. Right, well, the Queen has been laid to rest. We have a new king. I think I can agree that, despite it being a sad event, it has brought many people together. Scotland, in particular, looked really great on the TV, and the pipe bands and the lone piper brought a tear to many eyes, and a feeling of loss, and maybe a feeling of hope as well. That for us, that the UK. There's more to the UK than just, and especially there's more to Scotland than whiny nationalists all the time. So I think a lot of perhaps people in the rest of the UK would look at that and go, "Wow, Scotland is, it's got some, some things to offer instead of whiny nationalists." David, do you have any thoughts on that?
Absolutely. Happily, the one opinion poll which has been produced since the sad death of Her Majesty showed that support for independence in Scotland has dropped to 42%, which is down from the equivalent poll a few months ago by the same organisation, which showed independence support at 47%. As far as I'm concerned, this is very much in line with the trend which I've identified ever since the May 2021 election, which is that I truly believe that support for independence has plateaued and will fall, albeit slowly but steadily. And I think, as you said, Mark, the world witnessing the sad death of Her Majesty in Scotland and seeing very clearly the inextricable links that bind Scotland to the monarchy and to the UK has been the SNP's worst nightmare. This is just terrible optics for them, as they say these days. Whereas for the anti-nationalist majority in Scotland, it's been a long overdue and a very, very welcome reminder of the truth, which is that most Scots very much want to retain the monarchy and absolutely want to remain in the UK. So the message to the entire world could not have been delivered any more clearly. So for the purposes of Scotland's pro-UK majority, it has been a very sad, but in a lot of ways, a very heartening couple of weeks.
No, I do have to say that many of our followers are not monarchists and maybe even Republicans. That's fine, but for the purposes of for the purposes of beating nationalists,
Sure.
this has been a strong thing. And so, but we can see disarray in their ranks. This is the Reverend Stuart Campbell from Wings Over Scotland. He wrote "Getting Nowhere Slow." And of course, he is very upset with Sturgeon not doing what he wants. In fact, though, she's doing exactly what he wants. The plebiscite election, or what we call a de facto referendum, is something that he actually advocated for. But he says there is no movement anymore. In a couple of weeks, the Supreme Court will slap down any suggestion of a 2023 indy ref, and Sturgeon will shrug. Does it feel like we're 2 months into a serious campaign? Of course not. Even National has pretty much given up. And then everyone knows the truth in their hearts already, even if many still aren't ready to admit it in public. Until she goes, it's over. Now, I don't even know if it's until she goes. It's over whether she goes or not. It's faster if she goes, but well, we think it's faster because who can replace her?
Indeed. Well, I mean, you know my view on this. I believe she will hang on until the next general election, unless she gets a fit of conscience next year and says, "Oh my God, I've let you all down. I can't possibly stay on a moment longer." I can't see that happening though. So she's already given her excuse for losing the opportunity to have a referendum by stating in her own terms, the next general election will be a de facto referendum in which, if they get 50% of the votes cast, then they win. There's now zero chance of Sturgeon leading the SNP into the next Holyrood election. She's already said, she's already admitted publicly that she's considering what else she might do. So that's not going to happen. So assuming this Holyrood parliamentary term runs its course, there's no way she's going to lead them into another Holyrood election. So I think her days are now numbered and we are seeing the clock ticking. I genuinely believe that.
Well, I think everybody knows, and the only people keeping it going really are the National and some of the sheep who actually think there's going to be a referendum in 2023. The real hardcore nutters have moved on to the ludicrous claim of right now as well.
Yeah, I mean, that was always an objective of what we were trying to do, I think, as on our side, is to try and separate the independence movement into the nutters and the people who want perhaps good governance. And we'll talk a little about that. Mary's going to talk about that in her section later. Those who, the diehards, they're moved on to Alba, and Alba has no chance of doing anything, and even the dieharders, they're off onto this claim of right nonsense, and which is basically just laughable, really. And I think most ordinary people who are left are like, okay, now this independence is out of the way, or is going out of the way. How is it to be best to either improve the governance of Scotland, or who's the best to get rid of the Tories, right? This is what we talk a lot about. And why would anyone vote for the SNP if their vote meant that Labour would not get in to beat the Tories? This is the big decision, right? The anti-Tory people are going to have to make at some point. And I think Sturgeon's going to leave before then. I would be surprised if she doesn't leave after this, a few months after the Supreme Court decision. Everyone knows that's the end. Once they say no, and it doesn't even matter if they say no, because all they would win is the chance to have an advisory referendum that won't be recognised by the UK government, wouldn't be recognised internationally, despite what they think would be. It wouldn't be recognised nationally, and it wouldn't be recognized. It would be boycotted by pro-UK people who won the real referendum, right? So it's disarray, and I was reading this thing about this. Wings had another article which is about the de facto referendum, and it turned out he didn't actually want it to be in a general election. He wanted it to be in the Scottish election or Holyrood elections, where there's much chance of getting 50%, better chance. So It looks like the whole thing is a bit of a mess up. The nationalists are in disarray. Nicola Sturgeon has got no plan and is running out of options, and hopefully will be revealed as having nothing. The Emperor or the Empress has no clothes. We will be back in a second.
On that very, very tasteful note, yeah. Wow.
Yes, we'll be back in a second. Right, Mary, I think it's your segment.
So tonight, I would like to point out some of the main issues that the Scottish Government needs to deal with urgently. Yesterday, MSPs returned to Holyrood. Many issues, as we know, had been put on hold with the Scottish Parliament went into recess after the Queen's death on September the 8th. So the biggest issue facing the country is the current cost of living crisis, rising energy bills and food bills, inflation nearly 10%, and many families are struggling to make ends meet. And now we have the threat of looming strike as well. So just before the Queen's death, Liz Truss announced a freeze on energy bills, which could save the typical household about £1,000 a year. And the UK government has committed to spending billions to protect people from soaring prices and people in Scotland. The Chancellor, Kwasi Kwarteng, is to deliver a mini budget on Friday, so we'll keep an eye out for that. And we're expecting some tax cuts to be announced. This autumn, we're probably going to see a lot of strikes. Inflation is outstripping wages, so many workers will take to the picket line. The RMT union has postponed 2 days of strike action following the Queen's death, but they may still be striking. Other unions could soon be taking industrial action, including Scotland's biggest teaching union and the Scottish Secondary Teachers Association. So Sturgeon was forced to step in before for the bin strikes, and she may have to step in again to prevent schools from closing. So I guess my question here is, do we think this, what do we think Sturgeon's going to do? How is she going to react to all the cuts and the money coming from the UK government?
Well, I mean, my belief is they're in desperate trouble because they're going to have to fund. The SNP will be at least in part, SNP government will be at least in part populist, and they won't want to see damaging strikes. So they will help to reach pay settlements, and of course that is a cost that has to be met elsewhere. So there will be cuts to services that are going to have to be, and this is always going to be the SNP's problem because the numbers simply don't tally. So when you give with one hand, you have to take away with the other. You have no choice because it's not as if they have a bottomless pit of money. They simply don't. So I think it's going to be a very, very difficult period for the Conservative government and equally in Scotland for the SNP government. I think they're in a lot of bother.
Well, I think it's there's something quite interesting here that basically the SNP have never had to really cut, right, before.
True.
They've always basically managed to have enough money coming from the UK government, that an excess money to the tune of 12 billion or 13 billion a year, whatever the number is, and plus the COVID money. They've always had that money, a big pipe of money coming to them, and they've been able to make all the decisions, spend. But now there's a bit of a reckoning coming. Some of these pay deals are massive.
Yes.
They built in the billions or hundreds and hundreds of millions, and they cannot make the shortfall by asking for Westminster's money. So, I mean, in fact, perhaps, Liz Truss might say, well, we already give you 12 billion extra. So why don't you decide what to do with it properly, like grown-ups, rather than spending it on all your pet projects and wasting it on other stuff? This is an interesting situation. Well, how their followers, it's when we're forced to put austerity out, how will SNP's followers, take to that when they've been getting freebies all the time?
Yeah.
Well,
go on, Mary.
No, sorry, David, you go ahead.
I was just going to say, their mantra for years has been end Tory austerity, and now they're going to impose their own tartan austerity. Which
very good tartan austerity.
It's true, isn't it? So, I mean, how are they going to sell that to their adoring public who have joined them in speaking out against the hated Tory austerity for so long? I mean, really, talk about an emperor's new clothes. They're just going to be singing the same song that the Tories are doing. So I genuinely think this is going to be an incredibly difficult time, probably the most difficult time that any SNP government has faced since they took power in 2007.
Well, to make matters worse, we've also got the Scottish National Health Service. The waiting times at the A&E departments across the country have spiralled out of control, with the worst figures on record were in July, which, remember, guys, is the middle of summer.
Sure.
So nearly 30% of the people turning up at the A&Es, that's nearly 40,000 people, were not seen within the target 4 hours. So the Scottish Government's target is for 95% of patients to wait no longer than 4 hours from arrival to admission, discharge, or transfer for A&E treatment. So that basically means in and out in 4 hours.
Mm-hmm.
But they only met that less than 70% of the time. So they're 25% off the target, and
Yeah.
that's in July. So we're just weeks away from winter, when the problem in the A&E is going to get a lot worse. We're not even talking about backlogs in operations or anything else. We're just talking about the A&E. So I think the problems for the Scottish Government are spiralling, and I'm not seeing anything coming from Sturgeon or coming from our Health Minister, Humza Yousaf. Have you heard anything?
Well, we've got this. I saw this today. Here we go. Health Secretary Humza Yousaf expects immediate A&E improvement. That is quite some spin from the BBC there. But basically, it's the Scottish Health Secretary expects to see an immediate improvement in waiting times after they hit the worst level on record. I mean, that should be the heading there. Worst performance on record, So this is, that's something. But Hamza Yousaf has proven himself to be basically incompetent. He's a Sturgeon cheerleader. That's his role. All he does. He doesn't have any ability in business, any managerial ability whatsoever. Can't even ride a scooter. He's hopeless. And I think more and more people see that this kind of the people that Sturgeon has put around her basically don't have any competence at all. For example, if you go to look at Kwasi Kwarteng, for example, he has, there's just this massive amount of qualifications and experience, and compare him with someone in the Scottish Government. It really is just a bunch of chancers
Absolutely.
who have been promoted on their political ability rather than anything else. And not even their political ability, their ability to be loyal to Sturgeon, and two, to push the idea of a second referendum. Nothing else matters in this. And when Sturgeon's gone, you can see that will get rid of one of the things. Then who will they be loyal to next? And the other part of that is, their incompetence is being exposed daily.
Yes, I've got a couple of comments coming in here. So Massey Ferguson says the future is bleak.
Oh, it's not that bleak.
Okay.
We'll get rid of them soon enough.
And I've got Dale Couprie here. He says, I'm worried they will abandon their responsibilities and the public when it all starts to fall apart. I think we could be in for quite a desperate winter coming up.
Alan Jack's quite right when he says that the economic illiterates will just continue to blame Westminster. Funnily enough, my segment is going to be talking exactly about that, Alan, so look out for that in a wee minute.
Okay, what does he say? He says the economic illiterates will just keep repeating the mantra that Scotland sends more money to the Treasury than is made available in the block grant, while ignoring everything Westminster pays for directly. Thank you for that.
Yeah, I mean, we even had a comment in there, someone saying, oh, yeah, well, Scotland supports the UK. And we're like, no, I don't think so. I mean, it's nonsense to think, even in a very basic level, that 5 million people support the other 55 million. It's just
including London. Yeah, that's a good trick, guys.
It really doesn't make any sense, and there's no financial. I mean, the whole London, what it's like. You're a full financial centre and what have you, where all the money is actually made. Anyway.
Well, it is true that money is raised in Scotland. The problem is it's just not enough money raised in Scotland
it's not enough
for Scotland.
Money it's not enough money even to meet Scotland's public sector payments. So hence the fact that there is a deficit, and that's got nothing whatever to do with Westminster, people. Sorry, nothing whatever. Scotland's devolved administration fails to balance its budget. They claim that they balance their budget every year because they can't borrow any money, which is another complete fictitious lie. So no, it's just, please don't believe the fake hype, which is what I'm going to be talking about in a minute. Anyway.
Okay, well, there's just one last thing that I wanted to bring up. I think an issue that should be dealt with. it should have been dealt with all along, and it should be dealt with as soon as possible by the Scottish Government, is basically about the ferries. This is still going on. We've been talking about it for about a year now. They're now, those ferries that are lying there in the shipyard are now expected to cost over £240 million, which is more than double the price. And recently, Sturgeon has tried to shift the blame for this onto Derek Mackay, because he was the Transport Secretary when the contracts were awarded. But at a recent Holyrood committee, he basically says, I'm not going to be the fall guy here.
Yeah.
So the scandal continues. The Public Audit Committee is expected to report on the fiasco, which Sturgeon will have to respond to. That'll be coming up soon. But I'd like to draw all of your attention to a documentary. I haven't seen it, obviously. It's not expected to air until Sunday night, but that's going to be about the ferry scandal. So I think we should all watch that. It's going to be on, sorry, it's not on Sunday night. It's going to be next Tuesday night, which is September 27th. It's on at 8 o'clock, and that's all about the ferry scandal. So I will be watching that.
Right. Very good. I mean, the ferry scandal is ongoing, incredible waste of money. They're basically driven by the desire to get a signature on a contract that basically wasn't checked, so that they could present it a few days before their conference, and to show that an independent Scotland could make great deals. This is the kind of deal that if this is the kind of deal they make, then an independent Scotland would be down the toilet.
Yeah.
That's exactly, and we know this because they don't even have people in their civil service. In fact, or they can't even give direction to the civil service to say, what are the things that we have to look out for in this contract? What are the things that are going to screw us up? They just completely ignore them for a headline. And that's what they do all the time. Everything, just like, we'll get a headline. But, you can only do that so long before people start saying, okay, well, wait a minute, whatever happened to those ferries? And whatever happened to that big, that bank you were going to do, and that, that national energy company, and that other thing, and it goes on and on and on and on. And people go, they've not actually done F all, right? That's what happens. So,
indeed.
Okay, sorry guys, one last, someone's asked the question, what channel is it going to be on? It's going to be, the documentary will be aired on BBC One Scotland, 8 o'clock next Tuesday night.
Right, great. That was a very good segment there, Mary. Thank you very much for that. The Scottish Government is a disaster. Not to necessarily say that replacement would be any better, but, well, it has to be better. It's a very low standard, right? But we can only hope that they can get some competent people in there. Coming up soon, David is going to talk about the transparent lies of the SNP, and after that, it's going to be Summer of the Week. We'll be back in a second. David, you're up.
Okay. So, as mentioned, I wanted just to look at some of these very transparent lies which are regularly trotted out by the SNP as they attempt to persuade voters that independence is the way forward. Now, we're all familiar with these lies because regularly we hear even the most senior SNP figures, such as Deputy First Minister John Swinney, Party Leader at Westminster Ian Blackford, and Party Chairman Mike Russell, all telling us, presumably in all seriousness, that Scotland contributes more to the UK than it receives. Scotland, in fact, subsidises the rest of the UK. They say this in all seriousness. It's just quite incredible. And also, Blackford, of course, told us that the UK will continue to pay state pensions to Scots even after, if Scotland becomes independent. And we hear Swinney and Sturgeon saying that 100% of Scotland's electricity comes from renewables. Now, these four statements are all demonstrably false. Not one of them is true. Not one of them is even remotely true. The electricity one, yes, it's based on a figure, but it's certainly not 100%. So they're all false. Now, we've all heard them and we all laugh at them because we know they're false. The problem is, how do voters who maybe don't have access to platforms such as this, how do they know they're being told lies? Now, the reason I mention this is because earlier this week, I was in a bar, which is very unlike me, and I got talking to a couple of patrons in there who both happened to be Rangers supporters, which came up in the conversation early. Not that that's got anything massively to do with what we're talking about, but I mention that because they weren't your stereotypical backers of Scottish independence. And eventually, as occasionally we do, and when you're in a bar in Scotland these days, we got to talking about politics. One of them stated, I don't back in. I'm not at all for independence. And the other one said, "Well, I don't like the SNP. I don't trust Sturgeon. I think she's corrupt, but I believe Scotland must be independent." Right. And I said, "Okay. Well, why do you think that?" And he said, "Well, you just look at all the things we're doing. Like we send down our water from Scotland to the south of England because they don't have enough." And I said, "I think you find England has quite a lot of water actually." But anyway, I know Scotland's whisky exports are credited to England, not Scotland. And I thought this is just the usual nationalist tropes, the real nonsense that's put out there just to mislead people. Also, the guy went on to say, "Oh yes, Scotland puts far more into the UK than it receives back." And even his mate nodded at that, so yeah, I know that, I know that. God, and of course they finished up by saying, "Look at all the small European nations who are doing far better than Scotland. Norway, 4 million people. If we were independent, we'd be far better off." And I just thought, oh my goodness. So my question to you, Mary and Mark, have you ever encountered anyone who tells you this stuff in all seriousness and who clearly believes these crazy and completely fictitious claims? Is this something you've seen at all, guys?
Well, I mean, we come across it every single day on Facebook and on Twitter. They're always dragging these arguments out about the water, about money. Everything apparently is being stolen from Scotland.
Yeah, I think the thing here is that it's what's actually driving this. One of the things I like to think about is the psychology of it. Something is being stolen, right? They've managed to get this push of grievance that the Scots have been hard done to. Now, we talked earlier that Scotland is receiving billions of pounds every year from to cover the deficit, but also received billions in COVID money for all the UK-wide things. It was part of UK-wide furlough and so on, right? But these people still believe it because they think there's something that they've been hard done to. And this is what gets me about nationalist politicians. They prey on that. And they go in, and a bit like that in that movie, you know, what's the Lord of the Rings? The Wormtongue is talking to the king's ear, and he's like, you know, oh, you know, the English are doing bad stuff to you. The English are doing this, they're doing that, they're doing that. Yeah, that's what they're like. They're like those people saying these lies to them all the time, and it's so deep in some of them, especially when we see in Twitter and talking to them, and they're so deep in the delusion they just don't understand reality. Try and put it out to them in plain words like, you can, even if you got a referendum in 2023, it'd be advisory. The Lord Advocate says that in the submission, right? And then it says it has no legal effect. The words are right there, and then they go, "Oh no, but we'll get it anyway." International courts or something like that. You're like, wait a minute. You're just going from one delusion to another and getting down, further and further down a wee rabbit hole of grievance. And I think I do think that these politicians really have a lot to answer for creating this. And I should, of course, add in the National and other newspapers that won't just say the truth and won't say this is not going to happen. And we had the referendum in 2014, and it was supposed to be a decisive and binding result. That's it.
Absolutely right.
Move on. Let's deal with the things that Mary was talking about.
100%. But no, all of this, these guys wanted to talk. One guy was, "Oh, we're going to be independent. It'll be a bit better for our children if that's the case." And I thought, okay, I'm not even going to discuss it. And the thing was, it wasn't an unpleasant discussion. It was all very respectful. But I was saying to them, just really think about what you're saying here, because do you really think it's plausible that a nation of 5 million could subsidise a nation of 55 million, which contains the city of London? Really, do you think that's? And how can that possibly be? Oh, yeah, it's definitely true. Right. Okay. Anyway, so there's an element here that you can tell. The old saying that people will believe what they choose to believe. That's what they'll do. And there are obviously some people in Scotland who have got maybe a bee in their bonnet about maybe some sort of resentment towards England. So as soon as they see this, they're like, I knew that was true.
Yes, that's very true.
Exactly. Yeah. So
it's like the commentators, TV commentators, and if they manage to make a slip up and say English instead of Scotland, they're like, on it. Oh wait, that means we need independence right now. You know, it's like football commentators are stealing our water. You know, that type of stuff. You're like, it's utter nonsense.
Indeed.
But it's an independence movement that has basically grown from those tiny little grievances, and that's why I say that these people have come in and said, "Remember that time that that football commentator said that said England instead of Scotland or Britain." instead of Scotland. Oh, that's it. That's terrible. That means, and it works from there. Instead of going like, right, we're a big country. Some people in England don't understand those things. Fair enough. You don't get angry about it. It's, just say, you could maybe send them a note if you're really desperate about it. But I mean, really, it doesn't mean you have to go create impoverish the Scottish people through independence or breaking away from the UK to cover is correct thing, and lose all that stuff that we've got. What?
Well, here's an interesting point from Carol Smith, and I think this is where some of the blame should lie. She says no one in the Scottish press will take them to task on the lies they tell. Now, isn't that the truth? The press could be putting a lot of this to rest. They could be, they're supposed to be giving people a bit more knowledge to work with, but they don't speak out in a lot of these things, do they?
That's exactly right. They don't dismantle these fake facts, and so there's no real trusted source of facts. So I said to them, "Are you reading this newspapers?" No, I don't trust newspapers. Well, where in the name of God are you reading it? They must just be on social media anyway. But I'm just hoping we're not in danger of losing people in the voting lineup. That is. To these lies. So I just think we've got to find a way of challenging them effectively. What I said to these two gentlemen, as I said, it was very respectful chat. I just said, I would urge you both to do some more independent research, because really the stuff you're saying is simply untrue. So please don't vote on the strength of what you're being told, because really it's not right. So I don't know really what else to say. So I was a little dispirited after hearing this, because I just thought, how many other people have fallen for this nonsense? So I think all we can do is continue to expose these lies, make it clear that they are lies. And I mean, for goodness sake, of course they are. But all we can do is just keep battering home that message, I believe. Maybe we need to find a new way of doing it.
Well, I think especially, I was just thinking there that, one of the big problems is TV, particularly TV news. I think that's the thing where a lot of people get their quick news. They'll see a little bit of something, a segment here and there. And all these segments are all so much, are all pro. They're not critical, let's put it that way. They're either pro the idea of Scottish independence, or they're not critical of Scottish independence. And the framing is all wrong. As we said earlier, the framing is always independence is a noble ideal. This is great. Wouldn't it be great? We have saw this in the Times, Alex Massey. It would be a great thing if we could get independence. Independence as a respectable cause.
That's what you said, yeah.
Right, that's what you said, exactly. And you're like, well, no. And then in the same paper, you have Kenny Farquharson saying, if only Scottish nationalism is better. Why? I mean, what? It's always framed in that level. It's not like it's not like how they would deal with English nationalists. They don't deal with English nationalists. They don't give them any time of the day. They just say English nationalists are bad, and we won't talk about them. And if they did talk about them, they would write the most negative article they possibly could. So this is what has to change in Scottish nationalism. We have to see that it's not a noble endeavour, breaking up communities that have lived together for hundreds of years with no issues at all because of some of these minor grievances that have been amplified by nationalist politicians, is morally wrong. And that's what Lord Frost said. And that's the first time we heard that. It's morally wrong to break up the communities. And it's even more so morally wrong after a referendum, a decisive referendum, but where the majority of Scots voted to remain in the UK. It's time the media stopped doing this. It's not right. And we have to move on. Scotland cannot move on while they're doing this.
Amen.
Well said, Mark. Indeed. Well, yes. So concerning, but yes, I think we all know that there's a way forward here, and that is just to continue to expose these ridiculous falsehoods and to continue to isolate those who perpetuate them. So that's really all we can do, I guess.
Well, we may have something coming up that may help with that. So we're working on something, maybe doing something. So as our plans become more formed, we will let you know about it. Of course, if you're on the podcast or the show, you will know about it first, because that's what we tell.
We're always busy, up to something.
Yes, up to some scheme or other. Anyway, coming up soon, it's the highlight of the week. It is Zoomer of the Week.
Wonderful.
Right. Oh, it turns out it's me first up for the We're beset with technical issues today.
The machines are running away with the show.
Okay. All right. This one. There we go. Look at that. Yeah, very nice. All right, so it has to be hapless Douglas Ross. Now, as you know, we are no fans of Dougie. He has been fairly ineffective against Sturgeon, mainly because he's spending his time at the front of the queue, handing out knives to stab Boris in the back. And as we saw in the Truss versus Sunak campaign, nobody likes disloyalty, which is what we were saying all along.
Absolutely.
If you want to do that kind of thing, do it privately. There are channels to do it. You don't stand in the front to make a point and put off anyone who might be thinking of voting for you. Because, why would we vote for you if you won't vote for your boss? That's a very simple idea. Anyway, he was mad in a new controversy today because he hired this guy, and a press release saying he hired this guy called Craig Patterson. And Craig's claim to fame was in his CV. He said that he'd worked for Labour MP Jim Murphy. Well, let's have a look at the guy. Here we go. There's his mugshot. There it is. That's a strange photo, I have to say. But anyway, guy lied about his CV. And what happened was Jim Murphy's like, I don't know this guy. Who is he? So Ross said Craig arrives with extensive knowledge of Scottish politics, having once been a key part of Scottish Labour's operations. And
that's all a bit weird, isn't it?
Yeah, and then Jim says, never knowingly met this guy, let alone employed him in any role ever. Okay. So the offer was withdrawn, but a Conservative source said the web of lies concocted by this man is incredible. He embellished a brief period at Labour into his own fairy tale. I don't even think he was at Labour.
Didn't they check any references?
God.
Yeah, well, see, this is the clever part, right? Isn't it? Because if I was going for a job with the Tories, no, it's not me. If someone was going for a job with the Tories, and I say that I'd work for Jeremy,
I don't think you'd get it.
Well, I'd say I worked for Jeremy Corbyn. Right, which Tory is going to call up Jeremy Corbyn and say, "Well, hey, Jeremy, I know you like us so much. You're going
to hire your guy."
No, nobody's going to do that. So it's quite a clever scam, I suppose, in a way. Anyway,
well, until it's not, right? Because the guy been fired then?
No, he would never get the job.
Oh.
The offer was withdrawn, apparently. Yeah.
Okay.
The offer was withdrawn. I can't even say that. Scottish Labour source said it seems Douglas Ross has hired Walter Mitty. Literally, no one knows who this man is.
I love it.
Well, we've got Alan Jack saying maybe the guy was an SNP plant.
Oh, could be.
Yeah, what kind of plant? Anyway, latest reports are that Dougie has incurred the anger of senior Scots Tories. So that's a plus, perhaps. Perhaps he'll be given the final whistle.
Yes.
And move on to,
well, the red card.
Oh, yeah. Red card.
Yeah, the red card, Mark. You don't even know your football.
I was desperately searching for more.
Football analogy, yes. Very good.
He can move on. I should ask you, Dave, of course, and
you
know all of those. Anyway, that's Douglas Ross.
That's a funny one.
It's quite amusing. It doesn't seem to have much luck, to be honest. Well, of course, some people might say you make your own luck by checking the references on a CV.
Always a good idea, yes, indeed.
But
they could have checked out his social media and everything.
Yeah, I must update my LinkedIn profile with my amazing Olympic medal that I won in Beijing.
Yes, brilliant.
All those years ago. All right. Anyway, moving on. Mary, are you going to be up next?
Me next. Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Next. Here we go. Okay. Though my Zoomer of the week is the SNP's token Cockney, Mary Hunter. Mary seems to have landed several roles within the SNP, which is lucky for her, as she lost her Glasgow Council seat in May's local elections, which I found absolutely hilarious. Undeterred, though, Mary is still very active on social media, obediently spouting the party line on every issue, much like Olaf Stando, who's another unsuccessful May SNP council candidate. So, true to form, on the day of the Queen's funeral, Londoner, because she is born and bred Londoner, I don't know what is making that up, Mary spent the day watching the very moving proceedings and providing her own very twisted Twitter commentary. For example, she came up with this gem. "Oh, I like that lead royal car. It looks like some sort of vintage Rolls Royce. they should get a James Bond car too. Oh, that's hilarious, Mary. Very, very.
With the machine guns.
Exactly, yeah, exactly. With an ejector seat for her, hopefully. And then, of course, she came back with, I honestly wish they would shut up. I'm enjoying the music, and seriously, we all know where the procession is and where it's going. Really, does that include the viewers who don't have... We'll see it, can we? Brilliant. Good old Mary. And lastly, it was quite incredible. So lastly, she said, well, that was spectacular. I quite enjoyed it, but I must say this to our unionist pals. Maybe the next time you feel like sneering at yesers for flag waving and marching, just don't. So there you go. In other words, Mary believes that the hugely dignified events watched by over half the world, as we said goodbye to Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II, were on a par with the laughable scenes we witness every time a few hundred SNP voters attend and all under one banner rally. Okay, Mary, that's great. Mary, let's not forget, she is an expat Londoner. She lives in Scotland. She's an embittered SNP voter. But to use the occasion of the Queen's funeral to make cheap and very poor political points was exactly her style. Classless, totally lacking in dignity and an appalling taste. So that's why my nomination for Zimmer of the Week is Mary Hunter.
Well, they had one of those rallies, didn't they, in George Square at the weekend? There were more policemen than there were attendees.
It was pathetic.
Really very poor. And if they can't get people out in the streets, when you look at those Catalonia things, protests and stuff, masses of flags and so on. I had a guy posting one of these indy ref, one of the processions with all the flags the other day, and loads of flags. And he's like, this is what we're like. I'm like, no, it's not like that. It might have been like that before, but it's not like that anymore. And there's no comparison at all in tone to the royal funeral, which was quite an incredibly dignified event. It wasn't an excuse for flag waving. It wasn't about breaking up the community of the UK. It was about a shared moment in our national history. But to some extent, it shows the power of our shared history and togetherness that Mary did actually sit through the whole thing and watch it.
True.
And I'm sure she shed a tear as well when the lone piper piped at the end. Okay. Mary, you are going to be up next.
Okay. Well, guys, your Zoomers of the week have been quite amusing. I'm sorry to say that mine is not in the least bit amusing. My Zoomer of the week this week is Irvine Welsh. And actually, this nomination is very difficult for me to discuss because it is the most disgusting, perverse, distasteful, abhorrent tweet I have ever seen. Irvine Welsh posted this on the day of the Queen's funeral. Have you got it there, Mark?
Well, I don't have the tweet itself because I thought that would be a bit much. Yes. Do you want me to read it for you?
Oh, don't, guys.
Well, basically, it was about pleasuring himself over a photo of the young Queen. And he said, would this be respectful or disrespectful? He used even worse gutter language than that to describe it. So for those of you who haven't seen it, I do apologise for the shock value of this, which is probably what Irvine Welsh was looking for. However, I think it does put into very clear focus the absolute lack of decency that we see from many, I was going to say some nationalists, but I'll actually say many nationalists who have no moral compass. Now, he later deleted the tweet. He himself called it crass and classless, but went on to say, I don't profess to understand how people get upset at such things. Well, Irvine, if you don't understand why people would get upset, I suggest you go for therapy as soon as possible.
Right.
Your tweet was depraved, and you should go back to the sewer that you climbed out of.
No.
Oh, well said, well said. Just something you may not know about Irvine Welsh. A lot of the Rangers supporters who are watching, and I know there are quite a few, will maybe know that Irvine Welsh, when he was a young man, was apparently in a punk band which was called Stairway 13. The Stairway 13 is a reference to the area of the Ibrox Stadium, which collapsed and killed 66 people. That shows you what Irvine Welsh is like. And of course, he then went on to make a career telling his friends stories of heroin addiction. So to me,
Well, I mean, this is the thing. We've talked about this before. That how do you make
yeah,
a distinction between the artist as a person and their work? Now, Train
yeah,
Spotting is a fantastic movie. I haven't read the book. Mary, I think, has read the book as well. Fantastic, very evocative of its time. A
no
great
doubt.
piece of art. A great piece of art, certainly. But and it's and we can say the same of other artists. I wrote an article about this here. Scotland's Lost Socialist. Other artists such as Brian Cox, a great actor, and Bobby Gillespie there from Primal Scream. All people that are leaders in their field, and yet they have become entranced or afflicted or whatever is by this crass nationalism and attention seeking and other types of behavior that it really demeans them, demeans their brand as well. It's a bit like that. I mean, we see this guy Douglas Henschel the other day
Yeah,
talking about football fans in his derogatory manner, and again, it's just like, well, look, mate, I was quite interested in watching your show, but
yeah,
now I've realised you're a complete asshole. I'm not going to watch it anymore, right? And the same with Irvin Welsh. It's like you've got a brand, and maybe his brand is attention seeking and counterculture and all that, but it doesn't need to be so in your. It doesn't really need to be so in your face. You know,
not at all.
it's not really right.
No,
I
it's this
think.
shock value. That's what it is. He's just appealing to the absolute lowest possible base element in society with that kind of stuff. Really, it's just absolutely dreadful. So no,
I thought it was sickening.
yes,
I felt quite
agreed.
sick, actually.
Yeah.
What a take on the funeral of a much revered and hugely loved figure to say something like that. Well, okay.
Well, we didn't give it any promotion on Twitter. I left it off, and perhaps we should have had that discussion before this as well, because that's the thing. They want attention. They want people to talk about it.
Yeah.
We're talking. People believe no news is bad news. Any news is good news, right? Create stir the pot. Get people talking about me, and they'll buy my next book. Right? That's the way it goes. But it's not really any way really to behave. He's old enough. They're recently married as well, I think.
Yeah.
Everyone Welsh, and he's old enough to know a wee bit better than to do something like that. It's like, when you've got that, you're tweeting, like, should I really send this or not?
Yeah, quite.
You
Yeah.
know, he's old enough to know what he's doing. So it's cynical, I think, to some extent. Right. Okay. David, I think you can decide today.
Okay, can only be one winner. It's got to be Mr. Welsh for your utter disgraceful, appalling conduct. Not for the first time. You've plumbed new depth with this, Irvin. Well done.
Yes. No, well, so, Irvin Welsh, you are our Zoomer of the week, and please don't do that again. It makes you go blind for a start.
True.
It's not the way you should behave. All right. Okay. Anyway, we will be back with another show next Wednesday, September 28th, at the usual time of 7 p.m. Hopefully, we won't have so many technical issues. We will replace the batteries and the cameras beforehand.
Yeah.
Something like that. Thank you to all the donors who have so graciously donated to the show. We really appreciate your support. If you would like to join them, please go to our website, click the donate button. Everything is great. We need everything we can. Everything helps. Big thank you to UK Union Voice United Against Separation for posting the show on their channels. If you can, do two things: find a majority show on Google and subscribe to our YouTube channel. We're at 500 nods now. We need to get to 1,000. Then YouTube will start showing it to other folk, and then it will speed up, and more people will see this anti-nationalist goodness that you have been so kind to watch this evening.
Indeed. And if you can, please make a donation so that we can collectively destroy the pretendy ref. Let's bring him into this nonsense, people.
Definitely. And thank you all for your comments tonight. I'm still trying to put up some as I speak. Thank you.
Well, thank you, everyone, for your comments. It was really great. I saw some really good comments as we go along there. I watch it on a tiny screen, so I can't actually see most people's names. I can see the comments. So thank you all for your kindness in sending them in. All right, I'll leave you with the thought of the week. It's not banter. It's not a joke. It's hate most of the time. It's just actual hate. And we want to see the end of it. So, NewsQuest and the other people who are peddling it, please stop doing that. That's not good. It's not good for Scotland. It's not good for you.
Absolutely.
We'll see you next week. Thank you for watching the show with us.
Thank you.
Thank
Good
you.
night.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.